Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. We're going to discuss today the murder of Jayland Walker. And make no mistake, that's what it was. The police, their explanation, if it can be called that, is clearly a pack of lies. It's filled with obfuscations, weasel words, and lies by omission. Now we need to go ahead and break this one down, so that's what we're going to do. The police admit that Jayland Walker was unarmed when they murdered him, but they and the white media keep saying that, well, there was a gun on the seat of his car, as if that means something. Was he murdered in his car? No. So why even say that? This is just like the white media did with Freddie Gray. Well, they couldn't find anything on him, so they said, well, his mother was on drugs a long time ago. He was gunned down while running away. He wasn't firing any shots at the police because he didn't have the gun. Now, this murder happened on June 27th. The thing that stuck out to me is that the police have gone to great lengths to avoid having to say specifically what happened that night. And with this latest explanation that they've tried to put out, you see why. For starters, they refused to say at first why it is that they had tried to stop Mr. Walker's car in the first place. This was going to be a routine traffic stop. Well, why are you trying to stop him? Here we are 10 days later after the murder, and the police are just now giving a reason, if it can be called that, which means they've spent the last 10 days trying to make up a story. If they did nothing wrong, they should have released the body camera footage immediately, but they didn't. And what they're releasing now is selectively edited still frames and some shaky video that doesn't really show anything at all. The police's cover story that they made up is that they were only trying to stop Mr. Walker's car because he had, according to them, traffic and equipment violations. Now, the first thing you're probably wondering is what the hell does that even mean? That should be your first clue that these are police weasel words. First of all, they don't say what these alleged violations were. They're trying to throw up a word salad of empty verbiage, and they're hoping that people will read things into these police lies that the police didn't actually say. They're trying to justify a murder after the fact by innuendo. That's what this is. Next, the police claimed that during the chase there was a sound consistent with a gunshot that can be heard, and an officer on video saying that a gunshot had been fired from Walker's vehicle. What visual evidence do they have to even support this? A single still frame of video that shows, quote-unquote, a flash of light is how the police describe it. The white media says, well, it could have been a muzzle flash, but that's not what the police said. The police didn't say, here's the muzzle flash. That's the reason why they're not giving any timestamps for any of these videos. They're not showing that at the same time Officer What's-His-Name was saying, I think there was a gunshot. They're not saying, well, our police helicopter at that same moment. They're not syncing any of these events up. All this time they've had, and they still don't have their story straight. And look at the wording. A sound consistent with a gunshot. And a flash of light. They're clearly trying to tiptoe their way around the actual words. They're trying to hedge. They want to use words meant to mislead the reader or viewer into assuming things that the police didn't actually say. This is like when Hillary Clinton was talking about stop and frisk, and black folks were supposed to hear her say, well, stop and frisk, it wasn't effective. And black folks were like, see, she opposed stop and frisk. No, she didn't. She didn't say she opposed stop and frisk. She said it wasn't effective. That's a classic case of hedging. Innuendo. Keep in mind, the police's official statement isn't saying a gunshot was heard. They're trying to tiptoe around saying that. Instead, they say it's a sound consistent with a gunshot. Why are they being so coy about this? Apparently, they know that every single part of the murder of Jayland Walker was wrong from the very beginning, and they can't defend it. The police aren't saying that there was a muzzle flash. They're taking a selectively chosen still frame and saying there was a flash of light. So it could be a reflection from a street light, reflection from other cars, or a video artifact. It could be a lot of things. So the police in Akron aren't saying one way or the other that a gun was actually fired, though they are supplying enough innuendo that any casual viewer would automatically conclude that on their own, even though the police haven't said that. Next, they say they tried to use a taser to subdue Mr. Walker, but it was unsuccessful. The white media uses that word over and over and over again. They say the taser deployment was unsuccessful. They all use that same word, unsuccessful. CNN says they deployed tasers but were unsuccessful in subduing Walker. Newsweek says an officer is seen taking out his taser and this was unsuccessful. USA Today says video showed officers unsuccessfully attempting to stop Walker using tasers. So you have the white media cutting and pasting the exact same words. That set off all kinds of alarms in my mind. It just screams weasel words, because to read the white media's coverage, the police used tasers on Mr. Walker and they didn't work. That's what you would naturally conclude. You would naturally just assume that. I mean, what else could that mean? The public is meant to think Walker must have been high as hell on drugs. So the public's meant to think this is a crazy nigga hopped up on drugs and the police used tasers and the tasers didn't work because he was high as a kite. This is meant to justify the kill. That's what this is all meant to do. This is the same old dirty 'em up narrative. Because when you go digging around to try to find out what exactly does that mean, unsuccessful? What do the police mean when they say unsuccessful? When you look for it, you find a different story.
City officials in Akron, Ohio are releasing what they're calling extremely disturbing body camera video, showing the moment officers shot and killed 25-year-old Jayland Walker. Authorities say the officers tried to deploy tasers but missed. Authorities say the officers tried to deploy tasers but missed. Authorities say the officers tried to deploy tasers but missed.
Wait, the taser missed? But that's not what the white media said. They said it was unsuccessful. So just as we suspected, the police didn't actually use a taser on Mr. Walker at all. They tried to use a taser, but the taser missed.
Authorities say the officers tried to deploy tasers but missed.
But if you don't tell people that the taser missed, they will just automatically assume, as they're meant to, that the police used a taser and, well, it just didn't work because that crazy nigger was high on drugs. So they had to shoot him. I mean, he was high as hell. The taser didn't work. What other option did they have other than guns? Because the taser didn't work. They tried to use non-violent means, but it didn't work, and it's all his fault. Then the police claimed that the cops had to shoot him 60 times because the officers believed Walker was reaching towards his waist. Believed? They believed he was? These are not the words of someone who knows that they use force properly. These are the words of a gang of guilty murderers who know that they've been caught red-handed and now they're trying to excuse the murder after the fact. These are not explanations for what happened. These are feeble attempts to try to rationalize it. They clearly know that Mr. Walker was unarmed. And they also know that he didn't actually turn to fire on them. He didn't have a weapon at all. So they're using weasel words. They can't say that they believed he was holding a gun because they could see that his hands were empty. So instead they're saying they believed he was reaching for a gun instead. Does that make any kind of sense? They all felt that Mr. Walker had turned and was motioning and moving into a firing position. First of all, how does someone take a firing position while they're running away? You can't run and stop to take a firing position at the same time. But then again, the police didn't say that he stopped, did they? They said he took a firing position. That could mean anything. Though that's what their wording is meant to mislead the reader into thinking, that he stopped or that he took some sort of stance. They didn't say that he stopped, turned, and drew a gun. They say they felt like he turned. They believed he was reaching for his waist. Well, I guess they couldn't find any deceptively selected still frames that they could use to prop up that lie, huh? And the same thing goes for the police saying they felt he had turned. Felt? So they're admitting he didn't actually turn, they just felt like he had. Again, how do you feel like someone turned? That's something you say after the fact. Nobody who's in the moment of a combative situation says, well, I feel like so-and-so is turning, or I feel like he's taking a firing stance. That sounds like the kind of lie that a child tells when they claim one of their parents gave them permission to stay up late. And when the other parent calls the child on their lie, the child says, well, I felt like they did. Now, would any police department, judge, or DA accept an explanation from a citizen like this, saying that they shot someone 60 times because they felt like the person had turned threatening towards them. They believed the person was reaching for a weapon, so I had to shoot him 60 times because I felt like he was turning. I believed he was reaching for a weapon, even though I could see his hands were empty. Would the police accept that from a citizen who said that? Of course not. So why should we accept it from these liars? These are lies by omission here. They leave out all the facts and instead use vague weasel words and let the public's imagination fill in the rest. That's what this is. Sounds consistent with a gunshot, a flash of light. They felt like he had turned. They believed he was reaching for something. None of these are declarations, by the way, and they've had a week and a half to come up with a story that declares what happened. All of this is just a bunch of excuse making. Their problem is they need to make up a story that fits the facts of what happened, but their actions don't justify what happened. And that's where they're using a ton of weasel words. Police do this all the time, by the way. They claim that a suspect made a furtive gesture or that he made an overt move. What the hell does furtive mean? What does overt mean? That's what they do instead. Well, he made a furtive gesture. Furtive, by the way, doesn't mean threatening. Neither does overt. But that's what the person, like a jury or the public who hears it, is meant to believe. Is meant to mislead them into that. See, these police unions, they have their little seminars where they have lawyers come in to coach police on what words to say after they murder someone or commit some other crime. Like when you have all the cops who try to claim that they feared for their lives. As we all know, the police were told to say that because apparently that's supposed to be some sort of legal justification under the Supreme Court. They tried it until the public said, you know what, we don't believe you. People recognize the lexicon of a liar, which is what the police are. Hey, who are you going to believe? The cops or your lying eyes? That's what the white media is saying. Because the white media is already going hard to push their usual narrative. This is about police training, you see. It's a training issue. Why, if only the cops had been taught better. Meanwhile, they have white mass shooters in Buffalo, Charleston, or Highland Park, and they arrest them without harming a hair on their heads. The white media is trying to prop back up the old status quo. All these cops who are getting arrested and indicted and imprisoned, well, we got to start some sort of counter narrative against that, some sort of counter offensive. Let's just go ahead and look at NPR as a case study of this. NPR did a story about the murder of Jayland Walker, but it wasn't so much a story as it was a police press release. It justifies and encourages and tries to white-splain everything the police did. They didn't even make a pretense that there was going to be anything that would actually question the police's behavior. The third sentence of this so-called article begins what will be a 20-paragraph tirade white-splaining why the police should never be questioned, second-guessed, or even given oversight. Law enforcement and experts in police law who have viewed body cam footage of the shooting say that the officer's response reflects standard police training. Officers are trained to shoot until the threat they perceive and or reasonably believe is present has ended. Said Lance LaRusso, a lawyer who specializes in use of force cases. What that means is he's one of these paid police lawyer pimps whose job is to go into court and make up some gibberish, use some vague, crafty, esoteric language, whatever they have to try to mislead people into thinking that, oh, well, this is otherwise, this is justified. I mean, it's very complex when it's not complex at all. Murder is very simple. And that's just how this puff piece starts off, by affirming that law enforcement experts say it was a good kill. Shooting. Now, if that was really true, then why didn't the police go ahead and release the body camera footage from the jump? If that was really true, then the police wouldn't need to say that it was justified. The public doesn't need someone to tell them when use of force is reasonable and when it's not. You've seen, just like I have, every once in a while, literally once every blue moon, when the police murder someone or at least gun them down, the police, if they think that they can have a body camera footage that actually says, see, so-and-so, they had a gun or they were shooting at us or what have you, they release those the same day. Oh, it don't take no 10 days to release it. And they don't go to court and say, oh, you can't release this. Oh, no, if they think it's something that's going to justify them killing someone, they have no problem releasing it at all. So when they don't release it, that's because they're looking and going, oh boy. Now, NPR goes on to write that legally the number of shots doesn't matter, and it's up to the courts to decide whether the officer's assessment of the threat was reasonable. Yeah, problem is you got yourself a white media like NPR that does everything that they can to justify even the most outrageous of police shootings. And then NPR has a section of their propaganda piece that has the title, "Under Stress, the Human Body Doesn't Know Right from Wrong." I mean, they're not even pretending that they're not justifying the police killing black people. They're not even pretending it. They don't even write that as a question. They just write it as a declaration. You can't hold police accountable for what they do because they don't know right from wrong. Gee, why does no one ever use that as a defense for rape, arson, assault? How about as a defense in warfare? Why, there's no such thing as a war crime because when a soldier's under stress, the human body doesn't know right from wrong. They then try to use the same pathetic lies and blatantly false pseudoscience that lying shyster lawyers try to use when they have to make up some fairy tale explanation for why police murdered someone in cold blood, why they just decided to fire round after round on somebody who was already dead and on the ground. They quote a so-called professor as saying, "Unfortunately, the adrenaline, the stress, they take over, and it cannot be just clinically explained in terms of what's right and what's wrong," she said. It cannot be just clinically explained in terms of what's right and wrong. It cannot just be clinically explained. That's the judicial equivalent of throwing a rock and hiding your hands. You're going to sit here and give some sort of statement as being a medical explanation of what goes on while they're committing these murders, these heinous killings, and then turn around and say, by the way, this is not a clinical explanation, mind you. Well, that's the very definition of pseudoscience. She's making an assertion, and she's trying to throw whatever credentials she supposedly has behind it, as if this is coming from some sort of academic. This is coming from somebody who's a scholar, someone who studied it. And then she turns right around and says, by the way, there's nothing clinical about this. So her explanation is no better than a flight of fancy or a garden variety lie. This is the kind of so-called expert witness who the police unions give money to tell gibberish lies like this on the stand during their trials. Is that what you tell a judge? Well, we're going to give you an explanation, but it can't be clinically explained. One of the physiological effects of stress is the inability to see properly, she said. Peripheral vision is impaired up to 70%, she said, which basically impacts the perception of how many bullets actually hit the suspect, so they really don't know if they hit the target. Have you ever heard the white media or any of these so-called academics and lawyers using that defense for anyone except for the police? This is a tailor-made lie that's only used for them. They claim it's the stress of the moment, that there's a huge delay between when they think they see a threat and when they begin shooting someone to death, and then when their brains, such as they are, tell them to stop. Which of course never happens. That lie about stress impairing one's peripheral vision, that's a lie that police have used in the past. When Betty Shelby murdered Terrence Crutcher, her lawyers used that same lie. They claimed that she didn't know that there were 3 other officers on the right and left of her. 3 other officers who didn't open fire, by the way. Now keep in mind, when Kim Potter murdered Daunte Wright, she tried to use the "I was under stress and I forgot my left from my right" defense. But the jury didn't fall for it. And no one was more surprised at that outcome than the white media. They've been doing the usual steady drumbeat of telling the public that Potter was a longtime cop with no record of disciplinary problems, which, by the way, is the same thing that they said about Derek Chauvin and Timothy Loman after he murdered Tamir Rice and Michael Slager after he murdered Walter Scott. They always claim these guys had no disciplinary problems until you dig under their fingernails and find out that they did. And that whole being under stress thing means you don't know right from wrong. I wonder how far that goes. When Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd, was he under stress for the several minutes that he had his knee on that man's neck while his pals stood around and he had his hands in his pants pockets? The police in Colorado who murdered Elijah McClain simply for walking down the street, were they under stress? It's a lie. NPR knows it's a lie. This professor knows it's a lie, and the police damn sure know it's a lie. But guess what? The public knows it's a lie too. How many non-police officers have you heard of who tried this defense in a murder case? None, because it wouldn't fly. That's how you know this is some BS splaining meant to give an excuse to racist jurors who want some justification to aid and abet the commission of a murder. And here's another question. Notice how the white media never talks about what's going through the mind of a black person who has multiple white police pointing guns at them. Nobody ever asks what goes through the mind of a black person who is walking down the street and 3 white police attack him, like happened to Elijah McClain. The white media never has any pieces with academics and psychologists and psychiatrists talking about the psychological impact it has on a black person. How does a black person react when they see police chasing them or they see police murdering black people with premeditation and the media and the courts claim it's not a crime? What kind of stress does that put on a black person anytime the police call themselves chasing after them? Why is that not the default for the white media? It would certainly make a lot more sense. Why is it that not even one white media outlet ever looks at the emotional and psychological stress of the black victims of police violence? When the police claim that someone was resisting arrest, the white media never says, well, that person was under stress. They didn't know right from wrong. Nobody said that about Kenneth Walker when he defended himself from a white racist attack that took the life of Breonna Taylor. Nobody said that his eyesight was impaired, and there was a delay between the time he fired and the time his brain registered that the threat was neutralized. The white media never reports on a black person who the police have accused of attacking them or firing on them and say, well, it makes sense that black people would be scared of being harmed by the police, and that stress makes it where they fear for their lives, and the stress makes it where we have to understand whatever they've done. They don't know right from wrong. Because if that was the white media's slant, they would actually have a valid point. But that doesn't happen because the white media is as racist as the police. Their job is to brainwash the public, spread lying narratives that police violence is always justified. And no matter the circumstances, no black person is ever able to defend themselves legally from the police. There's no justification for defending yourself from the police. This is the white media trying to restore the police's get-out-of-jail-free card. Well, we won't let that happen. NPR can tell all the lies they want about, well, it's a training issue. Well, if only the U.S. police got the same training as, say, the European police, like in Norway and Finland, where you got all these white supremacist gangs running around. Well, they simply need to learn the emotional aspects of use of force. So if we hug these thugs with badges, apparently that's going to shame them into civilized behavior? So I guess those police who are using the pictures of black people as target practice, they just need more training about use of force, right? Because that's the problem, right? All these police who are throwing up white supremacist gang signs, they just need someone to educate and train them better in the use of force. They need to learn the emotional aspects of use of force because that's the real problem, right? This is the white media telling lies for the police, starting off from a lying presupposition that, well, the problem isn't the police themselves, it's training. They certainly would not do such things deliberately and intentionally, even though they do it deliberately and intentionally. What we're seeing with the murder of Jayland Walker is that the police and the white media are testing the waters. They were both forced to have to back down 2 years ago. The white media was forced to abandon their lie that the police can't be successfully prosecuted because the public just trusts the police. That's what Jeffrey Jerkum Tubin said. So now they're attempting to do an end run around the courts altogether. They're just saying that the police shouldn't even be charged because nothing is their fault. It's the fault of their training. And well, we're going to go ahead and give you some pseudoscientific gibberish and tell you that they don't know right from wrong. They're under stress and that justifies anything they do. They're not responsible for their behavior. As Dr. Frances Cress Welsing said, if the police's murders of black people is simply a training issue, then why is it that they don't do white people like that? Why can't they show us multiple reports and videos of white offenders who the police have gunned down in a hail of 90 bullets? Most police interactions are with white offenders. So if this is all just a training issue, then why is it that we don't have case after case after case where the police shoot an unarmed white person in the back 60 times or even shoot an armed white person 60 plus times? Where are the videos of police going into absurd overkill firing 90 plus rounds at white offenders then if this is just a training issue? It's not as if there's some lack of incidents. So no, it's not a training problem any more than the murder of George Floyd was a training problem. The problem is what it's always been, that the police in the United States, ever since their origins as the slave patrols, are in the business of harming black people. That's what their actual job is. The problem is that most police wanted to be in law enforcement because it would give them a chance to assault, rape, or even murder black people with impunity because the DAs, the judges, and the white media would ignore their crime or make excuses for it, but whatever happened, they wouldn't be punished. And for a long time, that is what happened. The white media, the courts, and the so-called academics encouraged and justified anti-black racist violence by the police. And we still see it today, as this NPR piece and Newsweek and CNN and all the rest of them show. Well, we're not having it. You can miss me with the lies that we can't punish the police because they don't know right from wrong, and they're constantly scared for their lives. As I've documented for you multiple times, statistically, being in law enforcement is one of the safest jobs in America. What's dangerous is being black in a society that allows racist thugs to kill you with impunity. That's what's dangerous. That's who should be fearing for their lives. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Nah-G95, Laquan, Jordan Inslee, Alvin McCoy, and Gregory Franklin. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.